Elik.
Good morning. Representative, I wanted to first start out maybe by acknowledging that witness slip count, which as we've been speaking is continuing to go up. And I wanted to mention the amendment one specifically, which was, I think, just posted probably 24 hours ago, and we've already exceeded the witness slip count on the original bill, and it's now, just a few minutes ago, 47,277 opposition slips to this bill. I also want to make sure that we acknowledge the witnesses for both the proponents and the opponents and our appreciation for you being here today. But I also want to acknowledge the thousands of people that came here today to take time out of their day to come and show their opposition to something that is very meaningful to them and their families. As I'm talking today, a couple just formalities here. I'm going to shorten homeschool administrator to parent as we talk about the bill, because I'm going to go into the bill in detail. I'm going to kind of take some liberties, but I understand the term. Instead of saying Regional Office of Education or Intermediate Service Center, or in the case of a school district organized under Article 34, I'm just going to say ROE. So we're just going to, is that okay?
That's okay, but there really is a very big difference between just being a parent and a homeschool administrator. I think ma'am, I apologize, I didn't catch her name. But when Aziza, when she testified, she is both of those things because she's part of a co-op. So there actually is quite a distinction. But for the purposes of your questions, Representative, I'll allow you to use those terms, and I think I know exactly what you say.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I also want to state here that all of us here today care about the safety of children in schools. All sides, Republicans, Democrats, proponents, opponents, we all care about the safety of children in schools. We all want children to be free from abuse and neglect in any school setting that the families choose. We have passed bipartisan bills in this committee and other committees to do that. So I want to mention that as we go through, that I don't think that you have ill intentions towards children, and I hope that you don't think that we have ill intentions towards children and families. So with that said, I'm going to just start on some questions, and I wanted to start talking about the homeschool declaration form itself. So in the bill itself, and correct me if I have said something that is not in the statute, generally ISB creates the form. The homeschool parent submits the form to either the principal of the public school or to the school district office for the school that the child would attend. Does that sound right? Sounds like that's in the bill. The form will include the child's name, date of birth, their grade, their home address, and the parent's name, date of birth, contact information, and home address, and an assurance that the parent has their high school diploma. Does that sound correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Do you think that some parents might be nervous or embarrassed to provide this information to government entities?
I can't answer that. I don't know.
So we just heard an earlier bill related to, ICE detainers and government authorities coming into public schools. And we discussed that there's fear and intimidation by some people, and maybe they are leaving their kids at home instead of. So I would assume that there may also be homeschool parents that are concerned and nervous about giving their date of birth, for example, to Illinois government. Maybe they had a child young and they really don't want to share that information. Maybe there's various reasons they don't want to provide that information, but one of those important reasons could be, we don't know how you're going to use this information, so why do I have to give it up?
Representative, I wasn't tested in committee, so I cannot answer that question.
So, but do you agree that some people may be concerned about providing that information? You do not agree? It looks like you do not agree.
No, what I'm saying is I am not going to, I don't have enough information. I'm not going to speculate as to what one family may feel and what one family doesn't.
Okay, so why would you say that in the bill, the parent's date of birth is collected for homeschool parents, but it is not in the statute to collect that for private school parents? Why is there a difference?
I'll always be to answer that question for you, Representative.
Hi, Dana Stover with the State Board of Education. So the difference would be that one is a declaration form and one is a registration form. The registration form doesn't have individual names of parents. It has more aggregated totals. And so the declaration form would be for that individual family.
Say that again. There's the difference between a declaration form and a registration form. Can you repeat that?
So non-public schools do a registration, and this would be creating a declaration form for the homeschool families, and the declaration form would be for the individual family, and for the non-public schools, that is an aggregated number for the entire non-public school.
Well, that's not actually true because that's not what the bill says. All right. Let's talk about some more about the form itself and maybe the process. This declaration form has to be submitted not just once, but annually by homeschool parents by August 1st to indicate the parent will be homeschooling. The principal or the district must transmit all forms to the ROE or CPS or whoever by September 1st. All forms shall be stored by the ROE for the children enrolled in a homeschool in that area for at least 5 years. And the school or the district or the ROE can receive the declaration form through electronic or web-based format, but must not require in that format. So it sounds to me like that form can be filled out on paper too, correct?
That's correct.
Who designs and hosts the website or the electronic transmission system where these forms are going through?
So that would be handled by the ROE or the ISC or CPS in those instances where those forms would be deposited.
What about the school?
The school could have that, but those forms would be for the ROEs.
But the forms have to go to the school or to the district first before they go to the ROE.
Yeah, and so the school district could establish that website, the ROE could establish that website, but they do not have to require electronic submission. So they could just get those forms in paper copy.
Well, actually, they all have to establish the website.
They could, right? So they could have that, but they don't have to require it be used on the website. So they have to have a portal for file submission, which they have a number of ways to submit files generally now, and that would be a part of that. But they do.
And you're talking about the district submitting to the ROE. Okay,
Districts
and I'm
and
talking about
ROE.
the school. Let's look within the school district system. The school has to accept these forms in some manner or another, either electronic or on paper. The school district office also has, and I'm talking every school in the district is how this is written. The school district office itself has to receive the forms on paper or electronically, correct?
Yeah.
And then the ROE has to receive the data from the district, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so is there funding available in this bill to help with the cost of all this electronic submission and the collection of the paper forms?
How districts do electronic submission between their individual schools in the district offices and to the ROEs is already part of their local resources. So they already have these types of file submission processes, and we don't anticipate that to be an additional cost.
How will parents know that it's secure?
All school districts have to comply with FERPA and ISRA, and they have to maintain those records in a confidential manner.
Okay, did that work for CPS when 700,000 former and current students' information was released recently?
You know, we don't want any sort of data breach whatsoever, and we hope that every school district takes the necessary measures to comply with FERPA and to protect their data as adequately as they can.
How does a parent know that there is a website and that they have to comply with this new notice requirement? Is ISB going to do an ad campaign to reach out to families throughout all across Illinois and say you have to submit this new form?
We'll have that form hosted on our website. We will also put that in our weekly message to be able to ensure that districts know that those exist. So the school districts that would need to be able to receive that form would have that information and be able to get that to their districts and the students that live within it.
Okay, so now school districts are responsible for the data transmission, the electronic storage, as well as outreach to homeschool families to ensure that they are filling out this form. Is that what I'm understanding?
They wouldn't have to necessarily do outreach. That would be incumbent on the homeschool families to file the form. And
How do they know they should file a form if they don't know that they're required to?
It sounds like 41,000 homeschool students already know that this form is coming, and that there's a large number of students and advocacy organizations that would be able to help with that information gathering.
But it's really important because there may be tens of thousands of families that are not here today and that are not aware of this, but we don't have those numbers, so we really don't actually know that, correct?
Well, thank you, Representative. I'm so glad that you brought up that point that we don't really know, but based on the 41,000 people that you've indicated have filed a slip, I think the information will spread quite quickly.
Sure, but if it does not, that is eventually a truancy violation that family is involved in. So I think it's really important that ISB would have a role in informing families throughout Illinois. Unfortunately, that comes with a cost to ISB, and you just stated in the bill that we discussed earlier that ISB's been directed to not support bills that have a fiscal impact. This is going to have a fiscal impact on every level of the school system.
We've been instructed to oppose bills that have a fiscal impact on the State Board of Education, and we do not anticipate this bill to have a fiscal impact on us.
Okay, I believe you're wrong on that. I'm going to move on, though. When the paper forms are received by the school or the district office, who's responsible for typing that information into the computer system that's been created to track this? We assume is going to be created to track this. This will require both school personnel and school district personnel to have both a manual and an electronic process, correct?
Yes.
What if someone makes a mistake transcribing the paper copies into the electronic tracking system? How a parent won't even know that a mistake has been made. It could be a slipped birth date, misspelling of a name.
All the current laws that would be over top of any sort of information like that, and any sort of irregularities or misentering would be at play still. There's nothing new about that. Those laws would still be in place.
So we have, okay, so here, just to review, we have 2 different information gathering systems, both paper and electronic, double the burden, creating confusion at the school, at each school. Let me be clear, this is at each school has to be ready to receive these forms, each district office and at the ROE. So schools are always stretched for resources. I think that's probably something we can agree on
Representative,
as well.
we do have a lot of people who want to ask questions in a limited amount of time. Can we move along a little faster, please?
I will do my best, but these are really, really important questions, Chair.
Please also recall the sponsor is going to bring the bill back, and you will have an opportunity to ask some questions offline.
Thank you. Let me just go to this then. Why are we having parents submit this form to various different levels of the school district? Why don't we just have them submit it to the ROE or the Intermediate Service Center or the Chicago Public Schools in one location? Why this confusion about all the different points of contact with the form?
I would argue there's certainly no confusion. And one of the points that why we wanted to do it this way was because we think it's really important for families to have an opportunity to interact with their local neighborhood school. We hear about neighborhood schools all the time. We want families to be able to access any special education resources that they are able to access by law as property taxpayers. They have access to those services if needed. We want families to be connected to the point where if they have vision and hearing screenings going on, that a family would be able to avail themselves of those opportunities. If, from what we've heard from different groups of people, that many homeschool families are embedded in our communities with their neighborhoods and kids who attend all kinds of schools. So it gives kids an opportunity and families, again, to engage in the things that are happening locally. We thought that that was important. We want people to be engaged with their local schools. They don't have to go there. That is their choice to be able to do so. But we want them to know that they have things that they could be a part of and that they're included. And in fact, we think it's important to do that. We want people to be engaged at their level.
I think homeschool families are well aware that the public schools are available to them. But
Well, that's so exciting. So that would make sure that they had opportunities to receive notices of those opportunities that they have. They can choose not to participate, but we want people to know what's there.
I would say, Representative, the opposite is true. Many families who would maybe be interested in taking part at services at the public schools are denied that opportunity because there's no resources available to do that. Children and all families are told, I'm sorry, you can't participate on this activity because we have so many kids that are enrolled already. We do not have room for you. So these touch points with the school are an administrative burden on every level of the school district that will be resources spent on families that are in other schools being homeschools than the actual public school students themselves. And I think that's an absolute shame. There's a part of the bill, page 5, line 22, that says that the schools shall inform the homeschool administrator of the principal of the school district to which the homeschool declaration form must be submitted. So now we find that if someone submits the form incorrectly, perhaps they thought that their local school was the correct one, but with school district lines, it's very confusing. Now the school or the district or both are responsible for making sure that they inform the homeschool administrator that the form must be submitted to a different place and inform them of that other place that it would be. This is more administrative burden. Okay, I think I've already made my point about the public school events and activities. Let me move on to the part that relates to the registration and recognition of non-public elementary and secondary schools. Why is it, we have voluntary registration now. Why is it important that this become mandatory?
The State Board of Education feels that we need to understand where all of our students are in the state of Illinois and to ensure that they are receiving an education.
I would also argue for the record that we have case law that actually identifies homeschools as private schools. And so legally, for parity purposes, it's important to make sure that the language is the same for both entities. We don't want to treat one group different than others. And ironically enough, and I believe, Bob, during our conversations in this negotiation, actually non-private public schools, they're already registered and recognized, so they already do this. You can shake your head at me, Representative, but I'm going to tell you that was the indication that we received from both our non-public school group as well as the Catholic school, as well as Aguda. Again, there may be there may be a handful that are not, but the overwhelming majority are already recognized and registered.
Well, if they're not registered and recognized, how do you know how many there are? Bob, would you be able to confirm, is that true, that most, non-public schools are registered and recognized? I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Oh, while we're moving, I'm sorry. Aziza, could you please click off your mic? Thank you so much.
Yeah, Representative Elik, most Catholic schools are registered or recognized. Not all of them are, but the vast majority are registered and recognized, but some are not. So how many are, I don't know off the top of my head, but most of them are.
So I have schools in my community that are not registered. And so let's say we have 102 Illinois counties. Let's say there's even just 2 in every county, which I think is probably highly unlikely because I can't account for how many might be in Chicago that are unregistered. So I think we are adding now, Dana, you mentioned you don't feel this is a burden on ISB. Yes, it is. Every year you're going to have, X number more schools registering that I assume you all have to review. You don't just take that application and set it aside. I'm assuming there's a review process. So I disagree that this is not a burden on ISB.
That professional staff already exists at the State Board of Education to do that review process. It is not an additional levy on those staff.
Well, I'm glad they have plenty of extra time available to add that burden of workload on themselves. I have grave concerns with the fact that in the bill itself, it says that ISB may request the detailed student and parent information from all of these non-public schools. Now, a comment yesterday is, well, we don't want that information. We don't have that information on public schools right now. Then why is it in the bill?
All information like that is handled at the local public school level, and it would be similarly handled by the non-public schools as well. We don't house that directory style information at ISB for any of this, and we would not request that annually, nor would we want that information generally.
Representative, why is it in the bill then?
Repeat the question, please.
Why does it say in the bill that ISB may request that information, the detailed student data information from non-public schools? It is in the bill.
That is ISB's discretion.
Would you take that out of the bill?
It's for truancy purposes.
But ISB doesn't investigate truancy, correct?
We are the ROE for Chicago Public Schools. So
Okay, thank you. Oh, interesting. Okay, so the same data that's going to be held at Chicago Public Schools is going to be held at ISB, so now you need to collect the information from everybody else through the state to make parity, I guess?
no, we would not need that information. Chicago Public Schools has their own truancy office, and they would be able to handle that. We would just be able to move that information from one area to another, but they would already receive that information under this law.
So why can't we take it out of the bill? That ISB would have this information for all these non-public schools?
I would leave that up to the sponsor, but it's more about ensuring that we have that information available if there is a necessary need for it, if and when.
Exactly. That's unknown. That's vague. This is why people have concerns. This is exactly why people have concerns with this collection of information. One of the witnesses mentioned the aspect about religious freedom, and I will tell you I have these grave concerns too regarding the fact that non-public schools, many of whom have a religious affiliation, are now subject to the registration, but also the data collection of their individual student information. We hear speeches on the floor all the time about how the federal government and DOJ, they're doing all this stuff with all of our personal information. How can we possibly think that that's okay in Illinois? Especially when that information is tied to religious schools. For example, if you go to a Catholic school, your children go to a Catholic school, the government may assume that you at least support the policies of the Catholic Church and that you send their kids there. And if they decide they don't like that, they have every information, all the information on all the parents who have ever gone, or other children who have ever gone to that school.
Is that a question, Representative?
I guess, yes. How do you reconcile the religious freedom aspect of the points in this bill?
Absolutely, there's nothing in this bill that limits or prohibits any form of religious freedom. There's nothing in this bill that prohibits a parent from curriculum that is religious. There's nothing in the bill that prohibits religious freedom.
I would also say there is nothing in this bill that actually protects children that are in abuse or neglect situations that are being kept at home and not in school. We did not give any resources, correct? We did not give any resources to DCFS to do outreach to these families, correct?
Representative, I'm really there's nothing in the bill that does that.
Okay, so there's nothing in the bill that helps prevent abuse and neglect in either non-public schools or children at home.
I'd like to make a clarification about who investigates truancy and educational neglect. That's not handled by the Department of Children and Family Services. It's handled by the Regional Offices of Education that already have truancy budgets built into, and investigations built into their budgets.
Perfect, they do.
And let me just, and I would also like to add to that, thank you. In addition to that, I'm really excited to hear that you all are going to be supporting increases to budgets to not just the State Board of Education, but to the Department of Children and Family Services. I'm thrilled to hear that you're going to be supporting that. I think it's also really important that at the request of many individuals, including education, that we have done our best to limit DCFS in the sense of they should not be looking at educational neglect. They're not educators. They're social workers. And so individuals who are actually the ones who should be looking at that, that's what's happening. Let me give you a really great example that was brought to me actually recently, because I'm not sure if you quite understand when the Regional Office of Education actually makes a referral for a truancy from a school, the Regional Office of Education, they send that to the state's attorney's office. The state's attorney's office actually makes that final determination whether or not they're going to file on educational neglect or something else. But recently I learned of a couple of cases in my own area where not only did the state allege educational neglect, they alleged other forms of neglect in that family, which absolutely proved this point, which was that truancy officer that had been working with the family to help them with resourcing them getting to school actually saved a child. They actually did their amazing job to make sure there was something else going on in that home. And now the state's attorney was making the determination on what to do. I was thrilled. I mean, I thanked my Regional Office of Education superintendent for them actually doing their job and saving that child. It was great.
Well, that's interesting because I know various ROEs have reported that when a homeschool family, it's determined if there's a complaint that it's a homeschool family, that they don't do anything further. So when you say that their budgets are going to include this, no, it's not, because they don't know the numbers and they could be getting complaints nonstop based on, God knows, any number of things, divorce cases, and people make these complaints on various different things on, a neighbor doesn't like the kid playing in the backyard. I mean, there are any number of reasons why these complaints could be received, but the ROE does not actually have enough resources, and I believe they're asking for more resources to be able to investigate this because there is going to be a financial burden on this system.
Educational resources are generally increasing would be helpful, but that's not the general problem when homeschool is invoked by an individual's family. There is no regulation for the ROEs to be able to do anything about a homeschool family that claims that they're homeschooling. They can't do anything about that. There's nothing in state law about that currently, and this just puts that declaration in. So why didn't we just give them the authority?
We could have done that without a registration scheme. We could have done that so that it's a complaint and they investigate. What we've done here is cause this huge financial administrative burden on every homeschool family, on every non-public school, to get to a point where all you really need is the ability for the ROEs to investigate. Why didn't we just do that? This bill has grown into something that it didn't need to be.
Actually, ISB was given, was it 12 million, Dana, in 2023 to address truancy issues. So yes, actually, ISB has invested, and that money went based to the ROEs based on the grant opportunities. I would take a deeper dive, if I were you, Representative, on exactly what the truancy laws state and what the authority is with the truancy officer. They can already check on something if they do. But typically what happens in a homeschool family, if they say they're homeschooled and things stop. That's it.
That's what I'm saying. So now when we say, oh no, this should be okay to be included in the ROE's current budget, that's not true, because they can now request the educational portfolio, they can request the parent's high school diploma. This is a lie to say that this is not going to cost schools, districts, ROEs, and ISB money. That is absolutely not possible.
Well, it is, because we also don't have any data that tells us how many families are actually out there. I'm sorry, Chair, you were going to say something. I apologize.
I need Representative Elik to bring her questions to a close. We have a list of other people that want to ask questions, and I have a feeling many of their questions may duplicate yours. We could circle back at the end if you feel that there is something of merit that you would like to add, but we do need to move on.
Thank you. I think I can close with this. We have had thousands of kids and families over the last year or so visit the Capitol begging and pleading for this General Assembly to keep the Invest in Kids Act in place so that they could put their kids in a different environment than the public schools and have just a little bit of help from the state to do that. You and your colleagues said it is not appropriate. We should not be spending state funds on private schools. That's what we're doing in this bill. If you are uncomfortable with the Invest in Kids Act, you should be really uncomfortable with the burdens that it is placing on every level of the school system. It is absolutely going to be spending money on private school families and homeschool families who are doing the best job that they can and chose a different environment for their kids. So I will leave it at that, Chair, and I know my colleagues have questions. Thank you.